really. You know, because I came south in the summer of 1940. And that's when I went to Birmingham, was in the summer of 40.
Now, during the time that you were...
I was at Fisk, but then I only became really active in the SNYC so that I knew all the intricacies of what was going on after I started working full-time.
Now, when did you get married to?
I got married, it's 47 years, this May 7th. So that was, in 88, it's 47 years.
Okay, so that was 41?
41. And May 7th, 1941. So I worked, as you see, a whole year in the SNYC before we decided to get married.
Now that, I mean, this sort of fits in because I have a lot of questions. I'm interested in sexism within the party and possibly SNYC and the women's roles and this sort of thing. So I have sort of a whole series of questions.
Okay, go ahead.
Now, before World War II...
Can I get you some more lemonade?
Oh, no, thank you.
No.
I know before World War II, were women in SNYC... In fact, the question I have really, I want you to deal with from the party and the SNYC. Were women struggling for leadership in the South? I mean, was it a real struggle? Because it seems like a lot of males held leadership. Women were.
Yeah, it's true. But there were some women who were, Augusta, who was from New York originally, played a leading role. Sally Davis played a leading role. Dorothy, not so much at first. She married Louis. She'd been active in Brooklyn, but she married Louis and came down. But I came and worked in Birmingham from my political convictions. I didn't at that time. I liked Jim Jackson, but I wasn't convinced that this was the man that I was going to spend the rest of my life with. I went there mainly that summer because I had been so taken with the conferences and the literature and everything that I wanted to work there. And now some people have said to me, including my daughters, since then, but Mom, when did you write to the guy I was practically engaged to and send back all your rings? Wasn't it right after you met Daddy? Before you, you know? And so they were trying to say that it wasn't only political, but I also went because, and there may have been some of that, suddenly that I was very... Louis Burnham had not come to work there yet, but Ed Strong was there. And I don't know whether you talked to many people about him. But if he was a man in advance of his time on the woman question. And he actually wanted to promote and help women gain leadership. In fact, I wanted to work behind the scenes and get people to vote and work with people and didn't want to speak. And Ed was the one who pushed me, who insisted, said, sit down, make a draft of it, you can do it.
Yeah.
And encouraged me to take a leading position. And it was difficult because particularly, not so much when we were working with the people from the universities and all, but when I started working a lot with steel workers and with mine workers, some of the wives, the men were so behind, even though they'd have organized the unions and had fought on picket lines and bloody struggles and so forth. Some of the women, including Hosey's first wife, the men deliberately kept these women from advancing politically. And they didn't understand us. And, when I would call the house, I would always invite both the husband and wife to a meeting. But many of the women had been kept so backward that they couldn't, that I must have been in it because I was interested in their husbands, or that, It was just such a wide gap. And particularly before I was married and everything, and even after I was married, when I didn't use my married name, the whole thing was so strange and stark, and they just couldn't believe that women came here who gave up their education or just came because they wanted to fight Jim Crow in the South and make things better. They had to think that because of the backwardness of the men when they came along, when they started reading literature, when they started getting active in the union, when they started getting active in the Southern Conference for Human Welfare, or the SNYC, oftentimes left their wives and their women behind. And so that this was something you had to, but Ed Strong and some of the people who consider themselves Marxists were struggled to be different than this. And some of them were very successful. And I think Ed was one of them in particular, that I think anyone that you would talk to who was active during that period would agree with me that it wasn't just theory on paper to him, but he took a leading role. And he and Jim Jackson both kept pressing me in particular and other women, no, we don't want you just here in the office running the mimeograph machine. And the mimeograph machines in those days were very crude. When you wanted to put two colors on, you had to take this whole felt thing off and mark up with the color and put another one on. And, it just took hours to do, just to get out a simple flyer that looked attractive. And because they were Marxists and were struggling, sometimes some better than others, they helped promote this. And another thing I wanted to say on this question, a thing that wasn't known so well, is on this whole thing of black-white marriages. There was a group of black young communists, including Ed Strong, Louis Burnham, Jim Jackson, Tony Morton, who moved out to Colorado, and maybe 3 or 4 other people who decided who were convinced that the South was the main place, as Martin Luther King did later, where the struggle for liberation was going to give leadership to the whole country. Were convinced of it, and that's why they went south. And they said, you can't have a white girlfriend. You can't be married to a white woman. But particularly some people like Louis, who was women at City College were in love with him, all these young white women communists. That you can't work in the South and have a white woman or a white wife. They made a pledge that they would only marry black women as young black communists. If they were going to work in the South and were serious about changing things.
That attitude basically was determined by their decision to work in the South. Really.
I think basically, but some people, I think, like Ed and Jim Jackson, their whole lives had been mainly, well, Ed had gone to college, but Jack's whole life had been from Virginia Union to Howard University to something around blacks. And if he had not been a radical, he would have probably married some black bourgeois woman who was still in Douglas Court playing bridge. And anyway, I think, but it would not, I would have been surprised if he had.
Okay.
I think that this is true of some. With Louis, who was a New York person and very brilliant, and women were crazy about him, who knows? Because in New York, there were a lot of interracial marriages. You can name them in that period with Henry Winston and many other people who were of our generation. But this group were convinced that the main struggle for black liberation was in the South. They wanted to work in the South, and they would only marry black women. And this is what each one of them did. It was a political decision.
Now, out of curiosity,
my husband didn't tell you about that, did he?
No, he did tell me.
Maybe I wasn't supposed to tell you.
Oh, no, it's very interesting. But, out of curiosity, a couple of things. One, was there a difference in attitudes between, say, women who were from the North or Midwest, those who sort of came down South to work, and women, let's take, for instance, Ethel Goodman, who was in a leadership position.
Yeah.
But she was born, raised in Alabama.
Right. Mildred McAdory.
Okay, Mildred McAdory as another one. Was there a difference in attitude on the question of sexism in women at all? Did you find that?
To be very frank, we were so thrown in the struggle. There was the Klan, there was the White Citizenship Council. You can't compare it to the 60s. It was dangerous. I think that some of that was a very minor problem. We struggled against it, but it wasn't a main issue. You might fight with your individual husband or male friend or whatever, but when you're fighting, because when you have a white person who comes into your house and the next day lights by the police or somebody are thrown on your house, and you don't know what's happening from day to day, and that you're sitting up in your office every single weekend and cops are killing blacks in the alley behind the Southern Negro Youth Congress office. This recedes in importance.
Yeah, that's it.
That you're all in the struggle together to change the South. And I don't think, I think this is a later struggle that it became so important. Not that, it wasn't something that we discussed a lot.
Right.
We read Engels on the Family. We read the works of a lot of women, Clara Zetkin, or international figures, or Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, or our hero Claudia Jones, who used to come south occasionally, and to stand up for your rights. But I would say it was not. This is my impression. It was not a major issue at that time. There was so much danger in everything that we did.
It could kind of confirm something that, differences between the white left and black folks who are radical in the South, because talking to Marge France, talking to other white women who were involved in the South, during the Popular Front, they had constant struggles over this issue of women's role. And it seemed like in the party, and this, you can clarify this, in the party itself, there was a tendency not to invite women and not to push them in a leadership role, whereas in SNYC, it seemed like it was not only encouraged but necessary.
Exactly. It was absolutely so.
So that you didn't have the same kind of resentment and struggles.
Exactly, and even the SNYC people who, in addition to being SNYC, were in party clubs, they also maintained leading positions. Sometimes the bigger fight was with white communists who were racist. That was the biggest struggle, where the blacks united, like when the Alabama Party at one time got an office in a building, the blacks had to ride up into the elevator, and we made they couldn't ride in the front elevator, had to ride the freight elevator, and we put up such a fight that they had, I think it was, the guy moved to Hawaii, who was the leader of the party, then he and his wife, I can't think of the name.
He was the leader of the party in Alabama?
In Alabama, and then he moved
to Rob Paul.
No, not Rob Paul. No. They moved to Hawaii, he and his wife. I can't think of them. Dorothy will remember, because she was closer to them than I was. Dorothy Burnham would remember.
Let's see.
No, after Rob. This guy was after Rob Paul.
Was Ordway Southern?
Ordway Southern.
Okay, Ordway and Mary Southern.
Yeah,
okay.
He got an office. So the struggles was subtle racism, or some blacks who would fight something of racism within the white communists, and they would want to bring the black up on subordination for being, these were some of the struggles within the party club that existed. And we fought it right down the, and because I spent all of my time in the SNYC, and very little, in fact, all of my political life, I have not been a worker in the Communist Party. I have done it everywhere. When I was in Michigan with the Civil Rights Congress, Progressive Party, Henry Wallace helped to hand up in Michigan. I worked in the Civil Rights Congress in Michigan. I worked here in the families of the Smith Act victims, in the Committee to Defend Negro Leadership of all victims during the McCarthy period. You probably read something like that. And with Freedomways magazine, I have never been an activist in the Communist Party of the United States. I've always been in a broader spectrum, and it's made a very interesting life for us, because I have all kinds of friends who are not communist, progressives, artists, writers, and stuff, all over the country, and particularly here. So whenever my husband has time, he gets to know all these people, and I go to some of his meetings. So it's made a wonderful thing, because I've helped to get him to know a lot of people he wouldn't otherwise know and can influence and so forth. And so so we've never been at any period isolated from black life, because he thinks that way, and because my inclination is to spend 90% of my time in the broader sphere. And even I still do it. I still spend a lot of time with the artists and writers with the Harlem School of the Arts. They just gave me an award last year, which is up there for my contributions in the community. And that's the school that Dorothy Maynard founded, and now it's a huge building and activity in Harlem. And so I've always been working in the broader field, and have chosen, because I some of the inner party struggle I have no taste for.
Right.
You have to be very strong to be able to continue to be politically active, politically honest, and I have no taste for that kind of thing. I'd rather battle it out with white racism and black nationalism and some of the things in the broader sphere.
You know, it's interesting when you're talking about the racism within the party. Something that, the evidence indicates that in the earlier period, even when the party was under Nat Ross, that you'd have, the irony was that you had a very segregated party, yet a militant anti-racism rhetoric. But then when you get to the Popular Front, the party becomes a little bit less segregated, yet the militant anti-racism sort of recedes back, and then pretty soon, like this guy Rob Paul, who I interviewed at length.
Did you interview him?
Yeah, I interviewed him.
Where is he now?
He's living in Willsboro, New York.
And what's he doing?
He's retired, but he edited a local paper out there for a long time, and he's a
I heard that he loved.
Yeah, but
Is he still married to his second wife? She was a young wife that he was married to. After he divorced his first wife, he had a son by his first wife. I don't know what happened to him.
Right. He has, well, we met one son, Tony. And then the woman he's married to now is younger. Mickey. Mickey.
Mickey.
Yeah, Mickey. Her name.
I haven't seen him, without exaggeration, for like 45 years.
Yeah. He's interesting because he's a Republican, and he come up as a Rockefeller Republican. I had reservations about talking to him because people said he would refuse to talk to me and that he hates the party. But he was actually very positive about the project that I'm doing, and it seems to be sort of, if there's such a thing, I mean, on the left wing of the Republican Party.
He wasn't a Reaganite.
Right. He wasn't pro-Reagan yet. He was still a staunch Republican.
But how did he view his year? Well, we can't go into that now because we'll be here for years.
Right.
But anyway, at some point, I'd like to know.
Yeah, it's interesting. Anyway, but
how did you find all these people? Just asking one person, and one person told another person.
Exactly, and doing a lot of detective work. And I've been working on this for about 3.5 years to close. I don't know.
But as I gotten older and more mature, I used to get furious by racism among white communists, North and South. But I've become more mature, and I know that you can't isolate people from the kind of society they live in. And those people, as much as they struggle against it, it's just like all of us bring our background to the progressive movement. I bring whatever I am from my background, whatever it's petty bourgeois background or whatever it is. And whites bring all their garbage with them to the movement. Some of them struggle better than others against it. Some of them do a real job and succeed in overcoming it. But many don't. Many, that feeling that they are the, quote, master race is very hard to lose. But now I understand it a bit more. When I was younger, I thought these people shouldn't be in the progressive. Not only shouldn't they be communists, they should be. But I understand a little bit more now. There's the struggle that people make against all the poison that we all absorb in this society, in our background.
The people who, do you remember anyone who sort of stood out as being, I don't know, just carrying that with them more so than others? So, like, if you take a person like Rob Hall, for instance,
I don't know, because it's so many years since I saw him, and my association with him was fleeting. On some printing jobs and some Southern Conference work, but I never knew him that well.
Jim Jackson doesn't like him at all.
Yeah. See, he knew it much better than the others. Guy who died, Sam Hall, was the good person.
Oh, okay.
But he was married to Sylvia Hall. Did you
I
talk
don't know.
to her?
I don't know.
Sylvia Hall, she married after Sam Hall. He died right after the underground period of a brain tumor. And she married Bob Thompson. You know Bob Thompson? He was one of the original Smith activists. And he was the one who somebody knocked in the head in prison, and he has a big plate, and he died later. He was attacked in prison by a fascist who was put up to it by the government, by a Yugoslav prisoner who was promised that his prison term would be cut down. And he was one of the original, but he was a heroic figure. He was a hero in Spain. He was in the Spanish War. He was a hero in World War II. Then he came back. He'd been a young communist, and he came back, and he was one of the first Smith activists, and he was sentenced to prison. He went underground. He was picked up and got it. And Robert Thompson, he was a wonderful man. He died. Then he and his wife got a divorce, and he married Sam Hall's widow. So Sylvia's been a widow twice. She married Sam Hall, and she married Bob Thompson. They're both dead. She was a native Southern. She still has a Southern drawl. But she's alienated from everything in the movement, so I have no contact with her. But some people might be able to tell you where to reach her.
Okay.
I know she does. I'm sure she doesn't like me and my husband very much. But
it's something that also curious me. Last question, on this poetry of women.
But on that question, I would say that the people I knew the best fought for my leadership, and pushed me forward to speak and to be a spokesman and to take leading positions. And when I became executive secretary of this men and women organization, they were the ones who thought that I was qualified. And all during the war years, I was the main officer in the Southern Negro Youth Congress.
Yeah, because I think about some of the old values and old way of thinking, and with you in particular, to be in a position where you're leading masses of people and engaged in public speaking, and you were from, and you still are, obviously, very, very attractive woman.
Oh,
I mean, really.
I'll go over and get you a flower for that. No, I still are, that part. That's not true.
You still are. And I look at the photographs, and even the way in which the cavalcade was organized, and some of the articles and stuff. I mean, did you ever have problems with particularly males who were active, and even males who like rank and file, taking these real seriously as a leader? Because at the time,
only as I said, some of those very backward men that I ran into. But my little crew of people, from people who came down and worked a very short time, like the Pope, was a friend of Langston Hughes, came down and worked for one summer. You'd heard about with the with
with the
the
caravan puppeteers?
with the puppeteer.
Yeah.
I'll think of his name.
Not Pernell Collins?
No, he was there. I'll think of his name. I have a collection of his poems. He was
Warren
Langston, Warren Cuny.
Yeah, Warren Cuny.
Warren Cuny and all of them. They had remarkable respect for me and for, it wasn't phony, it wasn't shallow. And I think part of it, too, was that I think that Ed Strong, Louis Burnham, and Jim Jackson, they weren't free of male chauvinism, but they were remarkable, and Jim is the only one left. Remarkable men. I mean, I have to struggle, as most women, on speaking with your wife here, that no men are free of male chauvinism. They don't exist. They also take in all the poison in our society.
Exactly, yeah.
They don't exist. But they struggled against it. They considered to be good communists, that this was something that they fought for women's rights, for women's equality. So there was, and they were quite remarkable men. Louis, the same way, he was about to start this new magazine which became Freedomways, and then he died. He had asked me to come in and be co-editor with him. And he was leaving the National Guardian, and I was leaving a job I had, and we were going to do this magazine together, and he died. And he was the writer and the editor. I was none of that. I was just going to be the main organizer, getting the whole thing together. But he wanted me to do it with him. We were going to be co-editors of this new magazine. And I can say that from the beginning, our husbands always shared the work, always helped with the kids equally, always did, as bad as the cooking was, some of the cooking. Of course, my husband claims he taught me to cook. Neither one of us could cook when we got married. But I learned. He didn't quite make it. And, they actually thought that this, to be a good communist, you struggled on the women question.
So that is interesting.
The same way they decided to marry black women, they thought you struggled on this question. But when I saw the young people, the men in the 60s, these men were so far more developed. And the SNYC was much more developed than SNCC.
Yeah.
There's no question about it politically, in every way. So that therefore the people who were the leaders in it were also much more developed in every area.
Yeah.
Not that they were free of male chauvinism. But...
when you compare, say, a Jim Jackson or Ed Strong to a Stokely Carmichael,
it's
just
like they were in two different worlds.
Yeah, the only position of women is prone.
Yeah. It was just like, there was just two different, there were different human beings. And that's the reason I say the death of Louis and Ed and some of these people would have made such a difference to leadership to that movement, because there weren't enough people left to give leadership to the young people coming up then. They were